Greetings everyone, and welcome to CJAX Arts. We proudly present to you Conversations with Artists. CJAX Arts is a global directory and a networking platform for artists from all art forms. CJAX Arts public concerts have spotlighted the finest musicians of India and the United States. This time, we feature an interview with writer Maureen O'Brien from Connecticut, USA. Maureen is the author of the novel Bee Mother. Her award-winning short stories and poems have been published widely in magazines and anthologies. Her most recent fiction can be found in Madville's Runaway and the East Jasmine Review's Me Too anthology. Maureen has been teaching creative writing to teenagers for 25 years. She holds an MA in creative writing and a BA in philosophy and religion. Interviewing Maureen will be Christine Beck, who holds an MFA in creative writing from Southern Connecticut University and is also a widely published poet. The topic today is Maureen's latest memoir entitled What Was Lost. We hope this conversation will inspire you and bring you renewed faith and hope for the year ahead.
Refuge. I wake up to begin writing, and in the dim winter light, I see where my eye is drawn when I open my broken Bible to the Psalms. Refuge appears over and over. What exactly is refuge? It's vastly different than shelter. Refuge is deeper, scarier. The stakes are higher when you need refuge. Shelter is from temperatures dropping and the chance of rain. You can probably make it through without shelter, but without refuge, you're vulnerable and truly alone. Refuge is wind blowing the cedars as far as they will bend, thunder that jolts you in an absolutely black night that has suddenly fallen. And you're running toward home. The need for it is deeper in the body. When you find shelter, you can calmly peer out, but the need for refuge makes you look within.
Maureen O'Brien, congratulations on your new book, What Was Lost. I'm very proud of you. I want to ask you about Claire's dress. So Claire's dress comes early in your collection, and it's in the boxing ring that it would be called Leading with Your Chin. So you view this dress and you decide that you believe that the dress is a genuine article, and it's from like the year 1200 or something. And you talk about I'm a woman who believes. I'm a woman who believes. So later in the collection, as you mentioned, you do talk about some visions that you have, and we're going to get into those. But I want to know, how much courage it took for you, particularly at the beginning of this narrative, to like put those cards on the table and say, yeah, I believe that this is the genuine article. That, for me, that was a huge leap. And so talk a little bit about that.
So I love talking about Claire's dress. I love that dress. When I went to Assisi and saw that dress, my spiritual director, Alice, had said to me, oh yeah, Maureen, when you go to Assisi, you can go down, you go down those steps down into where all that stuff is in that particular area. And Claire's bones are there, and you can feel a feeling from Claire's bones. And I was like, oh, I want to feel that. I want to feel that feeling from Claire's bones. So Claire is down there, as you know, because you've been to Assisi, and you have a special feeling for Claire, having your own Claire.
I do.
So I was like, I guess I kind of had this expectation. Oh, I'm going to feel, I don't know what I'm going to feel when I see Claire's bones. And it's like, I didn't really feel that much. And then I turned around and they had that it's a big sort of bin of her hair, which I described. And then I turned around and then there was Francis's tunic. And then that's when I see the dress, and I described seeing the dress. And it was, I think what really caught me off guard, and what I try and say in the book, is just how beautiful and how feminine it was. That I love fashion. Something that would have been beautiful and feminine in 1120 and 1220 you could wear today in 2020 and be like, wow, that's a beautiful dress. There was something the through line of the dress just floored me, and I loved it. And I stared and stared and stared at it. And it's right next to Francis's tunic, his stocking. There's blood on it. There's the gift of stigmata. So I think a lot of that is, I think it's I don't think it's uniquely Catholic, but I think it could be described as quote unquote Catholic, that I love these types of relics. I looked at that dress and I just felt such a feeling from the dress, that an incredible peace and beauty. And then in the book, when I tell the story that the next day, one of the other artists had said, there's just no way that could be Claire's real dress. And I was so hurt and so not so much, not offended exactly, maybe offended, but more sad and discouraged. And I was just thinking, you know, I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to argue. I love that dress. It has a magic to me. I could feel something from it. I trust that I feel something from it. And I'm not here to change anybody's mind about anything. I have enough to do on my own. Taking care of myself and my own faith is a big task. So I didn't really want to argue with her about anything, nor was she looking for an argument, but I just sort of let it go. And yes, I think that was the beginning of me realizing that I do really love these things. And also, when I had said at the end of the book, realizing that when I went to Assisi, that I was on a pilgrimage, I was a pilgrim on a pilgrimage. And I was like, what? Like, me? How could I be on a pilgrimage? Like, that's what other people do. That's for like nerdy, I don't even know what I thought. But not me. And then it was like, you're in a
fancy dress, right? You have a robe on and a cross around your neck and sackcloth.
Yeah.
I get
it's
it.
Like, you know, I'm not a priest, I'm not a nun, I'm not on a pilgrimage. So I just had an enormous respect for what a pilgrimage really is. And there's humility in that also, that I am a seeker. I do seek out. I love it. It means a lot to me. It's what keeps me, you know, it keeps my head straight.
You know, Maureen, something just occurred to me, which is you do talk a little bit in your preamble, your introduction to your book, about your own health issues and having had surgery and broken bones, etc. And I seem to recall, but correct me if I'm wrong, that there was an art installation at your school that involved your dress. It had pieces cut out of it.
Oh my gosh, Claire.
Now, like
Claire was in that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel Claire's dress in that art installation. And it just came to me, like that vision of that dress hanging up on that clothesline with pieces cut out of it. So what do you say to that, Maureen?
Thank you so much, Christine. I had forgotten about that. It's heartbreaking for me to remember. And my friend Anita Balkin was so much a part of that in helping me heal. So yes, that was between my cancer surgeries. I did that installation, which Anita had really encouraged me to do, like multimedia. To me, it just seemed like a bunch of crazy objects, but she was very supportive. And I love that about Anita. And I just took my favorite dress. That was my favorite dress. Evan Picone, my favorite dress at the time. I had worn it when my daughter made her confirmation. I had worn it to all sorts of things. And I just felt like my life was a mess. My body was a mess. And I cut the entire center out of it to sort of
if I'm not mistaken, you wore that dress to your launch reading of Be Mother at the Farmington Public Library. I was there, and I remember you wearing this little dress with these little sleeves. And well, I have a famous saying in my own family: what goes around comes around. And which reminds me of the spiral staircase. And it reminds me of the whole process of seeking, because in your collection, you talk about a transformation where you change your mind from thinking that you are seeking the holy, that you are seeking God, to actually seeing yourself as one of those sheep on the hillside and realizing that you are being sought, that you are actually the seekee, not the seeker. So yeah, talk about how that transformation in the way you looked at both your story and also the Psalms came about.
Hearing you say those words, Christine, I can feel it. I feel like that emotion coming up, because I think it gets to what I talk about, like that, a level of worthiness or unworthiness. I think pride has been a huge character defect for me. Well, I don't think it has been a huge character defect. I think pride has kept me from receiving a lot of love in the world. And that's not as true. It's really not true. I mean, I'm sure I will always struggle with that, but I think something just shifted. I don't know what it was through the Psalms, but it will go back to Psalm 23, because I think I do make an argument. It always goes back to Psalm 23, but it's just about this feeling of worth and it's almost as if some of the physical things that I went through with the cancer and my accident allowed an emptiness in me to be filled up. And also, I had never really been of this world in that way. There is a way for me, and every cancer survivor has a different story. So I don't want to, it's definitely not one size fits all. But for me, I had always been a dreamer, a poet. You know, here I am, right, staring out my window, thinking my thoughts, writing my poems. There was a way in which I had never been fully of this world. I always had a trap door, like a way of escaping. There's always like an escape hatch that I could separate myself. Surgeries, you know, tubes, hospitals, healing, fear, mortality, all of that stuff was a huge shift for me, because it was like I got lifted up and slammed down onto the earth, and it woke me up in a particular way. I feel that because I do work a particular type of program in the church and in my other areas of life, that I was more humbled to be able to receive. The pride just wasn't there as much. I just couldn't push God away the way I had been, or I couldn't just control it, or I thought I was controlling it. I don't think any of us are actually controlling it. And I think the combination of cancer and then divorce, being alone, all the hours I spent alone, I think just every time I asked for help, God was there every single time. And I think something just turned for me. There was a definite pivot where I started to realize that even if I didn't ask for the help, God was already there. It's just, which is why I always keep talking about Psalm 139. I do feel like you always have this, a spirit, whatever you want, whatever language people are comfortable with. I don't have any dog in the fight about what language people use, but I do feel that like something just cleaned me out, and I was ready to just receive love in a way that I never had before, from everywhere, people, nature, myself, God. Something just became unstuck. I don't really understand it completely, but I do believe it comes from putting one foot in front of the other and not quitting before the miracle. Absolutely.
I think it's interesting that you said it all comes back to the 23rd Psalm, because that's a psalm, of course, most people know. I mean, when you think about the Psalms, I'm sure that there will be some readers who will be perhaps somewhat intimidated by the Psalms. Who wrote them? How many are there?
I hear that a lot, Christine. I hear that a lot. People will say like, oh, you know, and they are intimidating.
Yeah. So is it your intention to try to demystify them?
If I could, I would love that. I don't know. I think I do have humility around that, because I'm not really sure, because there's so much about them I don't understand myself, and there's so many things I'm still trying to figure out. I need more of a background in the history actually of when they were written, because there's a lot of things that the more severe language in the Psalms about, like, you know, my enemies and this and that, and a lot of, you know, like, please God, like take them. That's the only thing that'll bring justice. I'm still learning about the historical context, which I think will help me a lot more understand where they're really coming from. I don't think you need that to understand the Psalms, but for me, it is about seeing that there's this voice in the Psalms, and usually it's the Psalms of lament that I am drawn to, because those are the ones when you're most desperate. And so I think it is just like, where are you? Like, where are you? And it's just about getting your feelings out, and then really sort of gnashing your teeth and getting upset. And that's when good things can happen. You cannot stuff your feelings. So with my students, I always use this saying from Piety Tomas, the Puerto Rican writer: tears are hard, without them, it's harder. And I absolutely believe that. So tears are hard, without them, it's harder. So I think the Psalms play off of that if you don't lament and cry, it's going to be harder. But if you just let the tears go, you can flow and you can heal. It's really, really honoring human emotions.
So let's talk about those smiting of enemies. Let's talk about that whole issue of smiting enemies. If we hold it that we're looking for history, right? We're looking for the historical enemies. They're on the battlefields. You know, they've got the swords, we've got the slingshots, whatever the situation might be. I think that's one narrative. That's one way to hold enemies. But what if those enemies are actually, what if they're qualities? What if they're thoughts? I mean, what if, for example, envy is me?
Yes.
What if I want my envy to be smited?
Right. I love that. And I love hearing that, because if I hear something like that, I think, well, I can look at them again with that idea. You're right. It's not always about what's external. It's about really facing yourself and you with God, you know, like asking for forgiveness. Who are you asking for forgiveness from? You know, like we need to forgive ourselves. People are so hard on themselves. Where does that forgiveness come from? So yeah, I love that. But because, yeah, there's a lot of that, especially in the King James translation, it's just over the top, some of that. Mm-hmm. There's definitely translations that are a little softer and a little more watered down. Some of those translations are, you know, I love them because I can navigate through them, but it's not for the faint-hearted, some of that. And I do understand the intimidation with them. It's just, you know, well, where do I fit in? How do I find myself in them?
So let's turn to rage. I love your vignette. You're driving to Light on the Hill, and definitely one of your enemies is the weather.
Yes.
Ice, the snow, you can't see out the windshield. You stop to get help, but the help doesn't work. You stop again. You know, at one point you just say, that's it. You know, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And I want to know about both that incident, but I also want to know about the value of rage. So I guess I want to know both, was that a turning point for you in some way? But I'm guessing, you being human and all, that you have felt rage again since that day. Maybe not to that extent, but that was a rage, right? That way you were actually pissed at God. Like, come on, you've given me more than my fair share. And to be fair about it, Maureen, some people looking at your life circumstance might say you've been given more than your fair share. Some people might say that. You know, when you consider your family losses and your health and a lot of other things, some people might say, you know what? Maureen's had enough. Like, we've given her enough. We've thrown enough at her. So talk about rage.
I really appreciate that, Christine. Amusingly, that particular line, there had been profanities. When I first published that with Hello Humans on the Hello Humans website, the original true version is me actually using profanity toward God. And publishing with Franciscan Media, we had some long conversations about not putting the profanity in. And ultimately the profanity is not in, which I'm very grateful for, because it doesn't fit into the book. However, I am known for dropping F-bombs. And that level of rage, I screamed so loud, I blew my voice out. And it came from a place I didn't even know existed in me. Like literally like a blackness inside my belly. It just came up. So much fear, so much hurt. And it just felt so good to get it out. I don't know if I could have expressed that level of rage anywhere but in a car, alone. I don't know if I could scream in a house. I've never, to your question, I've never had a freak out like that since then. I have never freaked out like that. I hope I never do. If I do, maybe, I guess I'll know how to handle it. But I just was so mad. But afterwards, the level of quiet that I felt blew my mind. It was just like, it was like I blew a fuse myself. It all went dark. And then I quietly just went and put the fuse back together and like, oh, okay. It definitely taught me, and I say this in the book, it definitely taught me that that's a really intimate relationship with God, that level of trust to say, I don't use the word fearing God. That's throughout the Bible. I don't, that's not a comfortable word for me. Oh, being afraid of God. Like I respect God. I love God. God is, my main goal to have that level of relationship. But, yes, I did end up really losing it. There's a really wonderful scene in Life of Pi, which is I loved that book and I loved the movie. There's a scene in Life of Pi where he also freaks out. I felt like I freaked out like the guy in Life of Pi on the raft, like where he's just like, what do you want from me? Give me my family. Like he freaks out. And it's a very profound thing when you've had a shift in your family. And I think anybody who has had either been divorced, the child of a divorce, can relate to that feeling of just, you're so powerless and it's not what you wanted. And we all have such a deep yearning for family that it's just primitive. So I think that freak out was just a very primitive howling sort of response. It took me completely off guard. And the other funny thing is when I was deciding to do that program at Light on the Hill, the one thing I was most terrified of was getting caught in weather like that. Mm-hmm. That was one of the main reasons why I didn't want to do that program, because of a 5-hour drive. Yeah. I made that 3-year commitment to that program. And I had to laugh because my biggest fear, however it came true. And it was just a terrifying moment. And yet when that happened, it was the weekend before my house sold and before I got divorced. Within 48 hours, it was all gone. It was just, I think, facing up to that, I'm so grateful that I was able to have that level of intensity. But just for future readers, if people end up reading the book, yes, I did cut out the profanity. I did not feel like I was being censored. There's just times when you need to sanitize it a little bit so that it could fit into the rest of, there's no other profanity in the book and I didn't want it sticking out like that. But it was interesting how that came about.
So yeah. There are so many stories in your memoir that have a combination of being profound discoveries for you, but also, what should I say, bringing up those pieces of resistance in you that, who knows, maybe they are insights to learning. And I want you to talk about, the story about the nun taking photographs at Assisi, because I know you to be a rule follower. I am also a rule follower, right? And like, that's against the rules. If you are not following the rules, and I'm not happy about that, right? You're not happy at all. And at the same time, you could see her as a 4-year-old. You could see her as someone who like didn't know the rules, didn't care about the rules. She was living in a different domain.
Yes.
She was not living in a world where rules made any sense. And somehow you ultimately both came to forgive her, understand her, accept her. I don't know, what are the words that go along with your ultimate conclusion about this poor little nun?
I do. I love that story. I love what she taught me. I will say that so San Damiano is where St. Clair actually lived and died. So it's such a sacred space. And I think it was, for a lot of us, at least in the story that as I try and understand it, you want to take pictures in these places, but they ask, do not take photographs. So in a world right now where we all have cameras, we all have our phones, we all are recording every single minute of our days and looking at each other, it's so precious that you can't take a picture there. And so it's like, oh, I love the idea that there's a place that some people have decided is so holy and so magical that we're not going to photograph it. And we all collectively agree. Then, yes, the nun at San Damiano is running around with her iPad, photographing everything. And we all were judging her. We were all just like, oh my gosh, like, how can you do this? And then when the moment did turn comical, when she was popping out of everywhere and we started laughing, it was just this collective healing. I mean, it's not polite, I guess, to take pictures in a holy site, but at the same time, she was so giddy about the whole thing. I think that is the word I use. She was so happy about it. And I loved the habit that she was wearing. Now, I'm not sure. I think she was from the Philippines. I'm not positive because I looked up later, like what her habit was. And I will show, I'm just going to take a risk here. So this is the photograph. I keep this nearby me all the time. So this is the photograph that I ended up taking of her. That's the back of her habit.
Oh, wow.
And that's her little pin. Like, so this is like the whole back of her. And this is the back of her when she was praying. And I love this picture so much. I have this everywhere.
It's lovely. It's lovely.
So
it's not at all what I imagined. So I'm really glad that you shared it. It's not what I was thinking it was. For some reason, I thought we were going to see her face and profile, or we would see something.
I know. Wonderful. It's like she's just this holy woman, very secretive, but the light was, and everybody talks about the light in Italy, in Umbria and Tuscany. The light was just on her back like that. And yes, so I'm like, damn girl, I'm going to take a picture of you then. You want to see how it feels?
We were talking earlier, Maureen, but you have, and I'm glad that this is kind of coming through in this talk we're having. You have an ability to see the darkly comic in life. And I guess the question I have for you is, because I don't really feel that this particular collection is, apart from some stories like that, are really funny. But I'm curious as to whether you think there's a role in the Psalms for being lighthearted. I know about, this is the day the Lord has made, let us rejoice and be glad in it, which happens to be my favorite scriptures. There is something joyful, I think, in some of the Psalms. And just wanted you to talk a little bit about that kind of role of lament and joy.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for that. Because I think that I'm still sort of literally marching toward more of that joy. My life has become more and more joyous every year as I get older, but I still have some goals set around that to let in even more joy. And when I saw the cover of the book, I was really blown away because Mark Sullivan, who designed it at Franciscan Media, had really thought about what I was saying about what was lost. And then the pomegranate really represents what is found. What is underneath what is lost? Joy, fruitfulness, abundance, springtime, summertime, a new season. And I love the visual message of the cover of the book. I never would have achieved that on my own. Obviously, I'm not like a visual artist, but even more so, I feel like his vision is directing me to that level of praise and joy, lightheartedness. And it's absolutely a goal to figure out, how can I let go of the past even more, accept even more, not be held hostage by my worries of the future, but really be where my feet are, is the true key to joy for me. And I absolutely agree with that. So I think one of my goals is to understand more of some of the Psalms that are about Thanksgiving and joy. And, you know, I was trying to say that about like watching men dance, like King David, you know, there's 150 Psalms. They think he wrote around half, but nobody really knows exactly what is going on. I like to believe he wrote half of them, but the idea of him dancing for joy, dancing for God like that is such an incredible thing. That changed me. That just blew my mind. The idea of somebody having that level of celebration and vulnerability, because it's pretty uncool when you get right down to it. The whole process of putting this book into the world has been a real challenge of just, yeah, I do have a faith. Yes, my relationship with God is the most important thing in my life, and it's just so precious, but I've been very protective of it also. I think another layer of that is having been in a public school system for 25 years, you kind of have to be careful about how you talk. Yeah. You know, I'm not teaching at a Catholic school, I'm teaching in a public school, and I need to be very careful about influencing anything about my faith. But the kids know I'm a person of faith. They understand that I value it. But now I'm just sort of going right on in and just saying, yes, this is who I am. And this is how I've gotten through. This is how I've hung on tight, basically. And, you know, there's a billion Catholics in the world, so it's not like I'm that unusual, right?
Well,
there are a lot of Catholics.
Let's talk about those couple of vignettes where you recount for us that you've actually had a vision. Yeah. One of them, it's a vision of Mary, and you're 10 years old in your kitchen. And then there's a later one where you actually have a vision. You're in a hospital with your dying grandmother, and you have a vision of Jesus. Now, address the skeptics among us and tell us what it took to actually write about those. So you hint early in your collection that you're going to tell us maybe later,
mm-hmm. Right?
That you had when you were 2 months pregnant with Max.
Right.
And then it isn't until very late in the collection that you actually let us know what that was all about. So those were both stories you thought you were going to hold pretty close to the vest.
Yes.
That's something.
Absolutely.
Tell us about them.
That's absolutely right, Christine. I had no desire to ever really talk about that. And the one I had when my grandmother was dying, I didn't even, you know, my husband at the time, I don't think I talked about that for probably 10 years. I kept it completely to myself. I never talked to anybody about it. And my instinct was, I didn't want anyone to, I guess the word I would use would be sully it. I didn't want it sullied, maybe mocked, although I'm not really sure at this point how much that probably was there. I just don't remember that clearly because now I'm through it. But those are things that have changed me. Those are two things that I was willing to write about that definitely changed me. When I was writing about Jesus being there when my grandmother was dying, I was trying to write very clearly. That's not something I looked for. That wasn't something that I wanted. It was something that completely took me off guard. It came out of a place I never would have anticipated. It's the power of being with somebody who's dying, who's been afraid of dying, and who suddenly was not afraid of dying. That I could not believe it. She had asked me for years, you know, Reenie, what's going to happen? Reenie, do you believe in this? Reenie, do you believe in that? And she was a faith-filled person, but it's hard to face that. So when she was actually dying and and we had that sort of, I consider it like a mystical experience. It being pregnant with, you know, so it was my dad's mother dying while I'm pregnant with her great grandchild. There's just so many, like so many wires crossing in a wonderful way. It was very, very profound. And I just decided that I think I felt strong enough to just write about it. If somebody thinks I'm wacky, okay, that's fine. If you get strength or want to share an experience that you had, that's fine. Oddly enough, since I wrote that and have shared some of those experiences with people, I've heard some amazing stories that people have. People have had some very powerful messages come to them, visitations, whatever you want to call it. So I think I'm maybe not so much more confident in the world about it. I just more secure in understanding what I believe, because I'm not afraid of being mocked for it. You know, if you think it's weird and strange, well, that's fine. Like, we can still love each other. We can still be family. We can still be friends if that's what you want to do. If it's a deal breaker for somebody, then that's not on me, that's on them. So I'm okay with it now. I don't know where that switched, but it did switch.
How did you know it was Jesus?
Well, he looked a lot like Jesus. I could feel it because he was so familiar. It was the person, spirit, whatever the language is. The language is always going to be limiting, but it was the person I had stared at for all those years, only I could feel it. It was like a radiance, I guess. And it was just an incredible feeling of peace. And I think asking my grandmother, you know, Grandma, are you afraid? And she said no. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, like something else is happening here. And she did have a very deep faith, and she had some very difficult things happen to her. About 4 years before she died, she had lost a grown son, and she had found him. I mentioned that she had found him dead. He was living with her at the time. That's the harshest thing anybody can go through. And she still had her faith, but she was still afraid. So I love that question, Christine. That's such a Christine question too. It's like, you know, like, give me the facts. I want to know, like, what's happening. It was just like, it was a feeling and of like, I could feel it there. And I could see it. It was like interlocking. There was like this interlocking thing that made it just so palpable. And again, like, I didn't share it for a decade. And then I was very, very careful about who I even shared that with after that happened. Mary, it was the same thing. I mean, that came at a very difficult time. And do you want to know, other people have shared with me that they've had kind of bizarre, let it be experiences. I'm not alone in that. It's just so funny. Other people have shared with me. So as the book goes out into the world, I'm definitely looking forward to, you know how nosy I am, Christine. We're writers. We're nosy.
Yes.
You got a story and you want to tell it? I'm here. I'm so looking forward to people telling me stories. I know that I'm a good listener, and I know I've got, you know, I'm not a gossip or anything. People can tell me their stories and feel safe, but I'm very nosy about the stories that I might hear. I'm really looking forward to that.
Which leads me to what you would say as the writer of this collection. And let's for the moment have you speak to someone who's not a Catholic.
Yes.
Someone who is interested or curious, but doesn't have what you would call faith. What do you want those readers to take away from the reading collection?
Somebody who doesn't have faith?
Yeah, someone who, for example, doesn't believe that you see Mary or Jesus, and doesn't, you know, just reading this and thinking, well, this is an interesting story.
I
Yeah.
love thinking about that, because I mean, when I was writing it, I was not envisioning somebody who had the same faith that even Catholics don't have the same faith. Every person has a different way, and we're always changing too. Like, we're always evolving. I would say to a person who is skeptical, I feel there's so much magic of God in nature. I think that just being in nature and really looking at the magic of that, tree roots. How do tree roots go into the ground? How do birds, butterflies, weird little things. There was this article in the paper the other day about new frogs they've discovered. All of this stuff that we hear about global warming and, you know, we're destroying all these species, but they found these new frogs. And I'm like, I want to look at these frogs. I think there is so much magic in the world. I think for somebody like that, it doesn't have to be Jesus and Mary and Gabriel and angels. It doesn't have to be anything like that at all. And in fact, you know, the chapter about my mother, I'm trying to make that argument. Like, my mother truly loves nature more than anything. And she did not have any set religion. She did not have any set faith. She's never talked about God. And she is a very holy person because of her love of nature. It's so deep. So I think there's many, many paths to the same place. And I think that really needs to be honored.
Yeah, talk about your mom for a minute, because this is a woman who made a commitment that you would be raised Catholic. And she honored that commitment without any eye rolling. Now, you and I might honor it, but we'd roll our eyes, right? We would somehow, you know, have some kind of holdback that we would communicate to our children. She didn't.
Right.
Why? What kind of a,
you know, it's like reflecting on that. When I first started writing about my mom, and it was connected to what my student, when thinking about, you know, the songs on K-Love and how corny they are and all of that. And that chapter just sort of flowed out of me, just thinking about her. And I had never thought about my parents before in terms of having a marriage where they were practicing different things, because it never even dawned on me, because it was never an issue. And I only realized it recently. I was talking to my younger brother about it, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, Reen, you're right. It never came up in any way." And I have a lot of admiration for that. You know, my mom just deciding to do that and support us, and just, it was like she just didn't have any dog in the fight, really. It was just, yeah, I don't know, just a very interesting thing.
How do you think that attitude on her part has informed you as a woman in the way you look at the world?
I really appreciate thinking about that, because I think that I have been open to many different religions. My undergraduate degree is in philosophy and religion. I studied all sorts of things. You know, the work I did at Light on the Hill, we're looking at Hinduism and Buddhism and all these different things. I'm very curious about what people believe. What do you believe, and why do you believe that? Or what did you used to believe? Or why don't you believe? And I think it shapes who we are. I think my mom gave me an open-mindedness, and that I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight with anybody about it. I think that's the saddest thing. I see Catholics fighting with each other. I see people going after Christians. I see Christians going after each other. I see the way people look at, you know, we all know the mess that we look at. And I just have a lot of sadness about it. I think there's a lack of tolerance and a lack of, the name calling is so awful, even among people of the same, you might think that you would think they'd get along a little better, basically, but it just is very, very dark. And I can see why somebody would have negative ideas about religion and want to retreat from it and not want to partake. I definitely see how somebody could end up in that place, without a doubt.
Which leads me to forgiveness. So you do have a piece on forgiveness. And you actually, in some ways, link your interview of your friend Doug and how he views the Psalm 23 and the sheep and so forth. In a way, you link him because of his experience in Vietnam. You link him to your father's experience in Korea and the trauma of going through war, which we will never understand. But the recognition that something about that trauma does require both compassion and forgiveness. So forgiveness, I mean, you've got some stuff to forgive.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've done some forgiving, and you probably feel like there's a little bit more that's being asked of you. So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about the role of forgiveness and the Psalms in your book.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing, back to like David as a character, very difficult character. And I'm really grateful that I have a background in literature and that I've been teaching literature all these years, because he's a doozy. He really is a doozy to try and really, it's like, whoa, you did a lot of stuff. His idea of believing that he can be forgiven, and he did, he murdered somebody, he cheated on his wife, he did all sorts of crazy things, suffered greatly for those decisions. But he still said, create a clean heart in me. Just please create a clean heart. And the idea that we can ask for forgiveness, that we can be forgiven, is really one of the most beautiful ideas, the hardest and the most beautiful.
There's a photo of my father that I believe holds his true spirit, his original innocence. There's a palace building set back from the sand, rising with a magical dome, and a boy running fast into the sea for the joy of it. Every beachgoer is turned toward the tide. A mother is holding up the hem of her dress, her young daughters emptying a rowboat. A few men are enjoying the sunny afternoon. The cut of their vests in three-piece suits and the brim of their jaunty newspaper caps is of the 1930s. The decade my father was a child, years before he disappeared to Korea, became a sniper in the war. Boys are dashing gleefully into the gunmetal gray surf. One kicks at the spray of a breaking wave. The others bolt, tilting forward with arms angled behind thin bodies. The most prominent boy in the picture, the one I now see as my father, leans in his inky one-piece bathing suit, not diving, but with arms eagerly outstretched to enter the water. His hands are open, ahead of the other boys. He's the winner, the first one, clearly elated to be letting go. His face in the sun, meeting the wave he fears will crash into him head on and knock him down, and it will, but first it will take him in and wash him clean. The Psalms are all about lament and thanksgiving, the high points and the low points. The Psalms that are about praise and thanksgiving are so beautiful. I'd like you to enjoy the next part of our program. How Great Thou Art is a beautiful song of thanksgiving, followed by Psalm 71.
My lips will tell of your help. 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 In you, O Lord, I take refuge. May I never be put to shame. In your justice, rescue me and free me. Pay heed to me and save me. My lips will tell of your help. My lips will tell of your help. Be a rock where I take refuge, a mighty stronghold to save me. For you are my rock, my stronghold. Free me from the hand of the wicked. My lips will tell of your help. My lips will tell of your help. In you, O Lord, who are my hope, my trust, O Lord, since my youth. On you I have leaned from my birth. From my mother's womb you have been my help. My lips will tell of your help. My lips will tell of your help. My lips will tell of your justice, and day by day of your help. O God, you have taught me from my youth, and I proclaim your wonders still. My lips will tell of your help. 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 My lips will tell